In the immortal words of the dearly departed R&B goddess Tina Turner, welcome to another edition of Thunderdome. Greetings, salutations, and namaste. It's your boy back after a little bit of a hiatus. And it was during some crazy Mercury retrograde, lunar eclipse stuff. I challenged and lost against the forces that be. So that was like my last video, was when I did the lunar eclipse in the middle of Mercury retrograde. Now, since then, it hasn't been like bad hiatus. I got certified for my personal training, and now I'm in progress on my yoga teacher certification. So I've been kind of like busier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs occupied by Southern people. And yeah, so anyway, I'm back to check in on some interesting stuff that happened whilst everything's been happening. And to kind of look backwards and forwards to see where we're at on this roller coaster trajectory. So I'll start with Mars and a video I dropped last fall that was titled something like Mars Changing the World, etc., etc. So it didn't happen necessarily in this exact way that I kind of thought it would. It happened in an even doper fashion that I'll try and articulate as clearly as possible. So the theme of this drop is going to be retrogrades and how they impact the resetting and revitalizing and revival of our lives through a bit of chaos and mayhem. So in March of this year, I've talked a lot about shadow periods and how they affect retrogrades. March of this year marked some interesting happenings in the financial realm, and these dates are uncanny when it comes to the shadow periods. So flashback, Mars retrograded in the fall, winter, and as I've mentioned on this channel, retrogrades are not just the actual period of retrograde. There's a period before the retrograde that's almost equal in time called the shadow period, and everything that happens during that shadow period gets affected by the retrograde. Then after the retrograde is over, the shadow retrace will go back over the same data, the same experiences, and it's like a third time's a charm kind of thing. That's what retrogrades essentially do for us without us knowing. Now, if we can harness this momentum, that's sort of why I put this channel together, is to give some practical concepts to be able to utilize the mystical elements of this realm. So in that regard, we're talking about Mars coming out of its shadow period. So basically coming back to the point, the degree point, where it started its retrograde. So when a planet retrogrades, it will start at a degree, let's say it's 5 degrees, and it's going to go back several degrees and then return to that 5 degrees, and this will mark the end of that shadow retrace. That's why life is a lot of stopping and starting and having to restart things, because we have 5 planets that go retrograde. And I'll get into that, how that's going to affect us in the fall. But let's talk about the couple of bank failures that happened. They were around March 12th, I believe. So 2 things, or maybe more. I'm gonna go one by one. First, Mars ended its shadow retrace that began October 31st on March 15th, the Ides of March. At the same time, Shani, Saturn, who is now retrograde, The date for the beginning of the shadow period is March 12th. So that means that everything that happens between March 12th and when Saturn went retrograde in June gets swept up into that retrograde that goes into the fall. And then once Saturn goes direct, there'll be another several months before it comes back to the degree point from whence it retrograded. So these dates are very key in terms of understanding what might happen going forward, especially when you look at the next bank failure that happened in May. This one was First Republic, happened on May 10th. This was just after the second of the pairing of eclipses, also smack dab in the middle of Mercury retrograde. So why is this anything more than just some cool coincidences with dates and planets moving? You have to sort of read into what these houses and what the nakshatras mean to get a clearer picture of what's going on. So not only did Saturn begin what's going to be its shadow period on March 12th, which coincided with the bank failures, it also moved on March 13th into a new nakshatra. So it moved from Dhanishta into Shatabhishak. Now Shatabhishak is known as the network circle. Aquarius is the 11th house of networks, of money coming in. So Mars, meanwhile, when it was doing its retrograde, was in Taurus, which is the second house of where that money goes from the 11th house. It's our bank accounts. It's our resources. So when Mars basically came back into Gemini after it, I know it's a lot. Mars came back into Gemini and finished its shadow retrace, meaning it started on October 31st of last year in Gemini, went back into Taurus, which is that bank account house, and now on March 15th, went back into Gemini where it started the retrograde, and meanwhile Shani's moving into Shatabhishak and beginning its shadow retrace all within a 3-day span. So this is all very significant because what's going to happen in the fall, imagine a relay race. You're taking some sort of item and giving it to the runner in front of you and they have to give it to the next person, right? That's what the planets are actually doing this whole period going back into last year. And the precision with which they're doing it is flat spooky to the point where I have to share it with you guys because it's just crazy. So here we go. I'm going to give you some actual dates. Mars began its retrograde October 30th, 2022, and it finished its shadow period in March of this year on the 15th. Saturn went retrograde on June 17th, and it began its shadow period right around when Mars ended its shadow period, March 12th. So it was almost like Saturn and Mars, right? First leg of the relay race. So flash forward to what's going to happen in the fall. There are 5 planets that can go retrograde. Of the 5, there will be 4 overlapping in sort of a succession. So here goes. Saturn will, of course, already have gone retrograde June 17th. The next planet to go retrograde is Venus, and this will be July 23rd. The next planet will be Mercury, which will be August 23rd. And the following planet will be Jupiter, which will be September 4th. What's really uncanny is that September 4th is when Venus ends its retrograde. So fortunately, all 4 planets won't be retrograding simultaneously for any long duration. But again, the precision of this relay race, just being captured in those dates alone, this is why I call the realm that we live in a clock, because the timepieces are the planets, and they are how we can arrange ourselves to optimally utilize this realm. So let's see if we can put this into some usable format and maybe make some predictions. Now, at the heart of this convergence of 4 planets with their overlapping retrogrades is our good friend Mercury. And my thing with Mercury is if there's sort of a mascot or, I don't know, a leader or a representative for the realm that we live in, Earth, it's Mercury. And that's why when Mercury goes retrograde, it's so impactful. It happens at least 3 times a year, and basically every few months, and happens for 3 weeks. And of course, when we consider the shadow period and the shadow retrace, that becomes 9 weeks. So let's look at Mercury, because it's really in the heart of all of this. And if we can do anything to sort our lives into some order during this period, because that's the idea, is retrogrades are going to bring up things. They're karmic knots. And if you have retrogrades in your chart and these planets are retrograding, it will bring up specific things having to do with that bhava or that house number. And these are good things. These are, the spectrum runs the gamut. So it's never a bad thing in and of itself to have a retrograde, a combustion, a debilitated planet. All of these things are opportunities for the soul to grow. And just as short-term negative feedback can be used to basically better ourselves, this is how we can learn from the planets as these mascots. And of course, Mercury is the planet of communication, information, business. This is what runs our matrix, right? And Mercury is going to go retrograde in August 23rd until September 15th. So what I would say is this: use that period to shut it down as much as you can. Bring everything into sharper focus in your life. Again, Venus shadow period already started on June 19th. So everything that happened from June 19th will get swept up into her retrograde beginning on July 23rd. And of course, that ends September 4th. Mercury will still be going retrograde during this period. So as Venus will be speeding back up, Mercury will still be retrograding, and Jupiter will also begin its long-term retrograde. So the few weeks before Mercury, so basically the whole of August, start looking at this period from August 23rd till September 15th, when Mercury is retrograde, to really do something uniquely specific to revitalization, revival, whatever that means to you. It could be starting a new business, it could be starting a new project, it could be starting a new hobby. Look into it, research it during this period. This is a great time to basically begin again, because things are inevitably going to shut down. Things are inevitably going to restart. And that's why, why is this guy talking about bank failures with a big smile on his face? Getting into what might happen in the fall, we might see some more stuff going on in that realm. Again, Mars is the only planet that's going to be in a forward trajectory for this whole rest of the year. Every other planet that can go retrograde is going to be shuffling up its energies, reconsolidating, if you will. So look at what Mars is doing, and you'll see what you can get done. And what Mars is going to be doing is very unique at the end of October. What all these retrogrades are basically culminating towards is this reset that I've been gearing this channel about for the last year and a half. It's the Rahu-Ketu axis from Aries to Libra. And at the end of all these retrogrades, at the culmination point, the convergence point of all these retrogrades in September and October, Rahu and Ketu will finally start to move their next axes. So Rahu will move into Pisces and Ketu will move into Virgo. Simultaneous with this are our eclipses. So we'll be having an eclipse cycle right around all of this happening. And that's why I wanted to get a little bit ahead of the curve, just to let everybody know fall is going to be something else. And the more we can do in advance of that, to prepare ourselves and to optimize all of that energy, the better. I'll do more drops and elucidate more. Love to hear anybody's comments about what they might want to hear more about. But what's going to happen is Mars and Ketu are going to come conjunct during all these eclipses. Mars is the soldier, and Ketu is our karmic past. So this is going to really be a trigger point for something spectacular to happen on a global scale that we might not even know about. And that's what's brilliant about all this. Ketu and Mars, it's almost like the soldier coming together with the headless karmic dragon. Mars gives K2 a head, but K2 gives Mars clandestine, secret, because it doesn't have a head. So it's basically invisible. So if you kind of see where I'm going with this, there's just going to be a lot happening. And again, I'll get into eventually some more specific granular analysis going forward. So I'll just close with this. I've mentioned my genetic link to the Dogon of West Africa a couple of times. And the reason why I feel like I can talk about this stuff with a smile is because they regard what happened in the last few years between Jupiter and Saturn, which is the other thing that I keep mentioning on this channel, as a pivot point for this realm, for our consciousness, for the development of all of our souls. So when this happens, Saturn and Jupiter becoming conjunct in Capricorn, which happened a few years ago, it opens a doorway. And they do a celebration when Saturn enters Pisces that basically is like the end point of this trajectory, this planetary trajectory, celebration. We can celebrate eventually. We can also just celebrate during whatever happens, because knowing that there is the potential for a new beginning, you're going to have to go through whatever it is in the transition to get there. So let's make the best of it. So namaste, everyone. Much love. Happy summer.